Hi guys, and thank you for joining us once again. Now we are at Narm Studios, which is just outside Holt and Bradford-on-Avon. Bradford-on-Avon is that way, Holt is that way, and Bath is sort of that way. So we're on the crisscross of the ley lines. And I'm here today with two wonderful human beings. We've got behind me here, over there, who have we?
Mark, otherwise known as Left Hand.
And here we have
Jay.
the man always known as Jay. So, what are we doing here? So, we are working, people hear me talk about Littlemen a lot, and we're here producing some new music. And Jay is a sort of a multi-instrumentalist, an engineer and a player and everything. And on this project, he's here engineering with us. And Mark is the keyboard player with Littlemen, and he also writes tunes with Nick. And I'm the drummist, and I also do the arranging and various things. And when we're in here, look at the sounds and look at the colour of the track and all that. So the three of us are in here today working on, as I say, new music with Nick's band, Littlemen. And hopefully you'll be hearing it over the next few weeks. But I just wanted to take this short break before Nick gets back and tells us off we're not working. Just to talk to these gentlemen about their role in this whole thing and how they think about recording. Because obviously you guys that watch this, you know, some of you are drum students, some of you are drum students about playing, some of you are already in bands, some are experienced, some aren't. So I said a little while ago, I'd try and get some of these people's stories for you along the way, because whether they're drummers or not, it doesn't matter. They're still musicians. Obviously, we're the best musicians of the lot, obviously. They didn't hear that. So I want to talk to Mark first. So Mark, how long have you been playing keyboards? And not today, I just mean generally.
My word, nearly 40 years, Rob.
Man and boy.
Man and boy.
Excellent.
I had hair when I started.
Now look at him.
Now look.
Saw on his chin and his chest.
It's more here.
Excellent. So your role in the Littlemen, could you tell the guys a little bit about how you go about the role of playing keyboards in Littlemen and the writing? And
of course, yeah. I mean, it starts with the process of working with Nick.
Right.
So Nick will have some ideas, whether that's lyrics, whether that's loops.
Yeah.
So then it's my job to kind of like to come along, to start to arrange into verse, chorus, introductions, get an idea, feel, sound, and then get a rough idea of how it's going to sound, and then pass it on to your good self.
Then I ruin it. I come in and say, drums on everything, and a Lynn drum. Everything's going to sound great. Yes, brilliant. And as far as when we're working together within the band, I mean, Mark comes here and he co-produces, really. And we think a lot about the arrangement of the sounds and the rhythm. And the rhythmic element is really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's not only just the sounds you pick, but it's, you know, the rhythmic appeal of the sounds you're using. And it could be the simplest rhythm, but if it's holding a track together or moves the track along or gives it a kind of different lilt, then it's really, really important. And I've always said that, you know, like melodically things are extremely important, but the rhythm element is really important too. And you're really into that, aren't you? You're down with...
Yeah, and as I say, especially on the latest album, I suppose, with more use of arpeggiators.
Yes.
And locking in with samples. So, yeah.
Could you just explain what that is?
Yeah.
For people that don't know.
So, on one of the synths that I use an arpeggiator. An arpeggiator, basically, it translates lots of different sounds into a sequence. And then you can vary that tempo. So, when we are recording a track, I will set the arpeggiator to that tempo, lock it in, and then rock and lock in as well.
Yeah, and it can be around, like, you can change the note value to triplet, eighth note triplets, six tuplets, or it could be 16th notes and quavers, can't you? You can change it to anything really that makes it kind of work. And I think that's really important when it comes to looking at the foundation of the groove of the tracks. And I think both of you would admit the groove on this album is heavier than the last one, right?
Massively.
Which you guys will hear, like Mark said about the loops and stuff. So let's talk to Jay, because Jay is a bass player, firstly, is that right?
Yeah.
And you play with Paul Erin, or you...
Used to, yeah.
And who you...
I'm playing with the Brackish at the moment.
Yes.
Ruben's Daughters, and Depth for a few other projects.
Excellent. And alongside all of that, you've been working in the studio. Sorry, I'm looking at his laptop. I'm just not pointing at random stuff. You've also looked at production, haven't you, and producing your own music and mixing.
I guess sort of the last 10 years ago, I started getting into capturing the band demos.
Yes.
And then it sort of just naturally evolved into recording for other people and building up my own studio and my equipment over that 10-year period. And I guess since lockdown is when I got into it, heavily into it, and bought some really nice microphones and preamps. And then I've been working with a few bands professionally.
And I first worked with you 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Anyone who's old enough to remember the James Whale show, and I think he might still be on actually. Sorry, James. I think you're still going. But it used to be on TV. But we did Radio Kent, didn't we? We did an interview with him years ago. And that was the first time that's the first time I'd worked with Jay. He played bass on those sessions, and I think that was a Littlemen thing, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it was. But yeah, James Whale, he was amazing. So that was the first time we played together, and then Jay has been brought in to engineer this project. And Jay, can we just talk a little bit about the miking of the drums? Because I think the drums are very different on this album, and the Littlemen's growing all the time, and I think that's what I wanted as a producer, wanted to keep it moving and sort of move away from the country Americana thing. So the last album, Visions, definitely did that, but this one again with different people producing and engineering, like Jay bringing in different ears. So we weren't always using 421s, were we, on the toms, for instance? That's my favourite. Yeah. But you went for a different thing, didn't you?
So we were using large diaphragm condensers, I think 4-on-4s. That's right. And they were being run through some Cranbourne preamps for most of the recordings, which have got like a sub-harmonic generator. So we were using that subtly just to naturally fatten them up. And that worked really well. And
on the bass drum, I think we still using...
I think we've changed it up quite... Usually it's been a Beta 52 and a large diaphragm to capture the subs.
Yes.
And then occasionally I think we had an RE20 inside. I think that's right, yeah.
And with the snare drum, I'm a fan of top and shell rather than the bottom. But that's not but I think I've spoken about that before, because actually miking the side of the shell is a thing that I love. But how did we mic the snares?
I think it was a Bayer Dynamic 201 on the top, just because you get a nice projection from the hi-hat with that if you get it right. And 57 on the bottom, I think, for most of them.
Pretty standard for the bottom.
Standard.
And hi-hat, well, that does its thing. What did we use for overheads? Because we had to change that up, and you had a different system. And I'll put a picture up actually of this, because everyone's got a different system, and Jay's, I'll let him explain it, but I've got a picture and I'll probably put it up right now actually. But
it's a large stereo Rueben microphone we used, sort of looking at just sort of splitting the kit in half really over the kick, the centre line of the kick and the snare. And it just means it's just not, I like the way it makes everything sound fat, but also just keeps the cymbals nice and smooth. And as we're doing a lot of heavy processing, it sort of keeps the cymbals from getting too sharp and shrill. And
it sounded really live, and that's a stupid thing to say, but it just sounds, you put the faders up and it just sounds like a great mix already. And nearly everyone I've worked with who are engineers have said that's what you're looking for. You want to be, I mean, you might get a little bit of phasing obviously in a few things, but when the faders come up, it just sounds good. That's what we're looking for, isn't it? Without too much mess and faff.
And really. I guess with those, because they're figure of 8, they're picking up above and below, so you get a bit more ambience in the room, so it just sounds a bit more natural.
And as because a lot of these people watching are obviously drummers. Go with you again, Jeff. That's all right. So that's kind of how we mic'd it up. And if you had any sort of advice for drummers of any age, really, people who are just getting into the recording studio and stuff, if they're, if he or she, they were off for their first session, in a few weeks' time or a month's time, is there any advice? I mean, because everyone gives different things. Some people say the same things, but that's good because it just reiterates the fact. But what sort of things would you say? But if you were engineering a session and you've got a drummer coming in,
for a new drummer,
you've never worked with, what's good advice? Do you think?
What's good advice for a new drummer coming into the studio? I guess just trying to play as you normally would, and let me capture you as organically as I can, and not. It's easy to get sort of red light fever if you haven't done it before. Don't drink coffee, maybe,
or alcohol during the session.
Yeah. I think the one thing that for people that aren't used to being in the studio, for me, is like the consistency of hitting in the same place on the snare. If you're trying to get consistent snare sound, that's what I find with younger drummers. That can be a bit frustrating if they're hitting the side, more of a rim shot. Yeah. So consistency and maybe. So I find sometimes having the cymbals a little bit higher, if it doesn't feel too weird, that can help. I'll have to think a bit more about that.
That's okay. No, that's good. I mean, to be honest with you, if I'd have talked to you before this and said, I would have whispered, can you tell them to be consistent? Because consistency, live can be a problem, but it's not that much of a big deal as when you're in the studio. And like Jay says, if you're not hitting the tom or the snare in the same place, or the hat every time, or you're laying into a crash too big at times and then laying off it, you need dynamics, but the consistency of something is really, really important. Same with the bass drum, you don't want the waveform changing unless the dynamics of the tune ask for it. So no, you couldn't have said a better thing, really. So that's perfect. And Mark, when you're working with a drummer, not necessarily in the studio, but any advice, because you've worked like at clubs when you were 16 years of age, you were put out, working with all sorts of Ollie on the organ.
Yeah,
I mean, you were Ollie on the organ.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you've learned, you read music, and you've studied and everything else. And also you're good at just improvising and working in the studio with someone like me over your shoulder saying, can we change the sound? Can we do this? I'm on all the time. And as these two will testify, I'm sometimes, at some points where Phil looks over his glasses, who's another producer, and just tells me just to calm down. And all he has to do is look over his glasses. And when he looks over, and I'm like, yeah, I've got to chill the heck down. But so working with a drummer in any situation, I mean, what are you looking for? I mean, it sounds fairly obvious, but what sort of things do you need from a drummer?
Oh my word, it's groove. I mean, I just love groove, and I think being able to listen and to lock in to the drummer, and I think if you do that, it just makes life a lot easier. Not fighting against it, just listen, just pick out what they're doing and go with it and try and relax. Yeah.
And these both these guys, as I say, are very experienced. Between them, there's probably at least 3 days of experience between them. No, I'm joking. There's a lot of years experience. They're going to get me for that in a minute. Between them, and I'm going to throw this in. I mean, what they've both said, as I say, this is completely unscripted. I've just asked them straight off the bat. They didn't even want to do it, but they've done it, which is beautiful. So I thank you for doing that. But can I just throw this in, because we talk about technique, we talk about musicality, which is my DVD title. I just threw that in there. But and they're both important. But would you sooner have the pair of you, a drummer who's consistent and doesn't show you how good they are every 5 minutes, but they're consistent with groove and feel, over someone that is good and maybe really good but keeps playing fills every 5 minutes and like you said, not listening?
Consistent. It's that consistency. Yeah.
And I know I said till I'm blue in the face when I do my little chats to camera about stuff like now, but I like talking to the pros. So you hear these guys, you meet these guys, and you see what they're all doing, and you can visit their websites and various bits. But I also like to get their bits, comments about drumming and drummers, as well as obviously the career stuff and everything, because you're here as drummers to watch this. And if you're not a drummer, thanks for joining anyway. So yeah, guys, just think about that. It's 2 more professional people that I've talked to, and as I say, I haven't told them to say these things. They've just come out with it. So maybe the next time you're playing the kit live or in the studio, just think about a few of these things that we talk about, and the session might go a little bit easier for you, and the phone might ring again, or the text might ping, and you get another session. But thanks, Jay. Thank you, Mark. You'll probably see these guys again at some point. Thanks for tuning in, guys. What day is it? Have a great Tuesday, or if it's posted Wednesday, have a great Wednesday, because we're in the studio and really we shouldn't be doing this because Nick's out and about, so we're just doing it in a little break before we get a pasty or something. So thanks for joining me, guys. Take care, have a great day, and I'll speak to you soon.